Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I ended up giving this book a 4-star rating, which means I really liked it. I thought it was a really good, fast-paced science fiction, and reading this so closely to reading Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke really helped illuminate the difference between what we can get from classic sci-fi and something that a more modern author is able to do. It just really shows like the breadth that genre has. It really was a good comparison and something I really enjoyed seeing, how something written, I think it was in the 50s for Childhood's End, and then something written within the past 5 years could use scientific concepts and theories in such different and creative ways, and how characters could be so different. Overall, I did give Dark Matter a 4-star rating, which I think I already said, but let me tell you a little bit more about what Dark Matter is about. We follow our main character, who is coming home one night from a bar and is abducted and transplanted into a world that is very similar to his own, but not exactly the same, and his quest to get back to his family. And I mentioned family because in the 2 Blake Crouch books I have read, family is extremely important. The only other book I've read by him is Run, and family is also a very, very strong aspect of that book as well. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump into some things that really worked well for me in this novel and some things that didn't work as well. And the first thing I'm going to mention is the pacing of this book. This is not an overly long book, and I think this book really straddled that line of giving you just enough information, being just slow enough, but moving fast enough to keep you interested in the plot and want you to keep reading. Once again, like my past Blake Crouch book, this is a book that just makes you want to turn the page, to know. And I guess I'll just add in the mystery element that it seems was going on in this book, where something crazy would happen, something that kind of just made your mind spin, and you really wanted to know more. And that's what made the pacing in this book great. It had time for slow moments where, you know, our characters are reminiscing, are sad, are dealing with trauma, but also moving forward in a way that, you know, we're not staying too long in any one place that could really slow down the book to a point where it's a drag. Plenty of books hit those slow points where they're trying to show characters being vulnerable or going through something traumatic, but they either can't execute it as well as Blake Crouch does, which he does an amazing job of doing that, and that just kind of keeps that pace flowing, along with the mystery. You know, he's so good at ending a chapter. This is the wrong kind of book to read before you're going to bed, because I would be getting to the end of a chapter and something would happen, and I'd be like, well, now I have got to continue because I need answers. I need to know what is going on, because the mystery is great, and he gives you just enough information along the path where you're still slowly starting to build in the full structure of what's going on, but without like handing it to you all up front and kind of taking away from the enjoyment of experiencing what we're learning at the same time as our main character, Jason. Jason is obviously the character we follow, and he does a good job of like giving Jason, the reader, just enough information to start building hypotheses and just kind of like experiencing the world without it being so heavy-handed and us kind of knowing more than it felt like we should at that point in the book. I already mentioned the family dynamic here, that Jason is really trying to get back to his family, and this is actually going to be also a negative, but in general, the family dynamic and just like caring about your family is something that Blake Crouch does on such a level that it's really inspiring to see how much these characters like felt and care about their family and wanting to get back to them. It's just, you know, if you are somebody who has very strong connections with your family, I think this will be a book that resonates with you a lot, and the decisions that the character makes are logical decisions to get back to his family. That's another thing I want to praise. There are a lot of situations that I think a less talented writer, maybe one who didn't think the plot all the way through, would have characters make dumber decisions than Jason does. Jason makes, in my opinion, pretty well executed plans off the information that he has. That doesn't mean the plan always works to his end goal, but it does mean that, you know, there's no moments where you're like logically upset that something just doesn't make sense. That, like, you know, there are those moments in books where characters just do something that makes no sense. Why would anybody do that? Like, if you're fighting a shape-shifting monster that can turn into anybody, why would a group split up so they can get picked off one by one by a monster that can look like the other one? Or, you know, something like that. that's not something that happens in this book. It's very logical, and which is nice when, you know, it's a science fiction book and you're dealing with a professor. You would hope that they make the logical decisions that pretty much anybody would make. There's none of the bad horror movie trope where they make decisions that make absolutely no sense. I quite enjoyed the science in this book. It is kind of one of those things where it's just kind of on the cusp of being so far out there, but being able to kind of suspend your disbelief to a point where it still is like, it makes sense enough. You know, anytime you deal with kind of out there theoretical science, you know, physics, multiverse, universe kind of things, it can get to a point where it's just kind of basically magic mumbo jumbo that has real no consequence or any kind of scientific backing. And in this book, at least, I feel like Crouch did a good job of basing this idea in science in a way that maybe if you understood this on like a physicist level, doesn't make any sense. But for me, somebody who does not have that background, but, you know, was explained it logically in this book itself, I think it did a really good job of, you know, introducing the concepts, explaining it in a way that I think most people will be able to grasp and then run with and kind of see the decisions, like I said, that Jason makes throughout this story. And some of those concepts can be really hard to do. And so the fact that Crouch was able to craft it in a way and work it into the story in such an integral way was great. With all that being said, I think my favorite thing that this book did was, I think everybody questions decisions they have made in their lives. And that is something that this book gives not just the characters, I mean, that is a journey they go on of like how their decisions affected their life, but I think it gives the reader an opportunity to say, there might be all these other things, but it's not always better if you had done something different, to maybe be happy with the life that you have. And yes, there might be decisions that could have drastically changed your life if you had done something else. You know, I think a lot of people ask the question, like, if you could go back in time, what would you change? Personally, I've always really been the person who says I wouldn't change anything because I like where I am, and I could see how, you know, if you were in a bad spot mentally, financially, any kind of things, health-wise, you might want to go back and change decisions you've made. And I think it's a really interesting quandary to ask. As I've gotten older, there are definitely things that I look back on and maybe I would change. But for the most part, personally, I think I'm pretty happy with the decisions I've made and done. But, you know, getting to have that thought kind of provoked and then shown through Jason, the main character, of how different his life could be and how it wasn't always going to be better, is just that kind of fun philosophical question wrapped around science fiction, which I think is just super well done. So far, pretty glowing praise for this book, and I actually don't have too many negatives. One thing I am going to mention, we get introduced to a character in this book. Her name is Amanda, and Amanda ends up making a decision that to me was not satisfying. I understand how it worked in the book. It makes logical sense. I can see why she made that decision. Like I said, I feel like most of the characters here make logical decisions that would make sense for them. But unfortunately for me, I would have much rather explored the ramifications of Amanda not making that decision. I'm being vague because I don't want to spoil what decision I'm talking about, what happens to her. But personally, the decision she made, I wasn't a big fan of. I understand why she did it. It makes sense, all of that. But it's just not the thread that I would have wanted. I would want her to basically do the opposite of what she does and just kind of see how that affects the story later on, especially with how this book ends. I think it could have worked and would have made sense that, sorry if there's an awkward cut in there, I accidentally spoiled something pretty major regarding this character, so I'm making an awkward cut to make sure that I don't spoil anything for anybody. But yeah, the decision she makes, I wasn't a big fan of. My only last critique I really have of this book is that there are places we go that I would have liked to have seen more of that, and that could have really ballooned the length of this book and could maybe be tiresome. I think this book is getting made into a TV show, and I think, if I'm correct, it's one of Blake Crouch's more recent books. It might be Recursion, but for some reason I think it's Dark Matter. If that's correct, that this is getting made into a TV show, I think this aspect that I would have liked more out of this book will be in the TV show, and I think that'll be a really nice thing. But overall, very positive. This is a book I would recommend to pretty much any reader because the sci-fi is not too much. It's a fast-paced, really fun read that you can knock out in a couple of sittings, and Blake Crouch has been really great for me. Like I said, only 2 books so far. I'm looking forward to my next one. Let me know which one you would recommend down in the comments. I was thinking maybe Recursion, maybe Wayward Pines. I think that's a trilogy. It really just seems like he is an author that clicks for me and that I really enjoy. So if you do have a favorite Blake Crouch book, let me know down in the comments. But as always, have a good one.